Welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me? Because I'm just conscious of the fact that we're in a really large room. Anyway, I've been asked to talk about caring for clothes, and for me, caring for clothes is such a big topic that I've got so much content that it's kind of crazy. So I'm going to just see how far we get. And I wanted to really start with, I suppose, what clothes mean to me, and I suppose what my kind of, I hate the word journey because it's so hackneyed, but I suppose along the way I've gone from being just a clothes lover to someone now who really wants to be a guardian of clothes. And there's a Māori term, kaitiakitanga, which means guardianship, and it's typically used of the land and the sky and the sea. But I like to think that we can preserve those things as well by really looking after our clothes. And even if we're not going to keep them and we want to cast them on because they're not being worn anymore by us, we can still, I suppose, find good homes for them and also to take care of them. So I'm going to start by talking about some of the, I suppose, I think I've probably in the last 10 years seen, close to 8,000 pieces of clothes. It's a huge volume. I see less and less, to be honest, because I'm getting more and more refined in terms of what I want to look at. But some of the common things that I see that are things to fix are hems. And there's a workshop today at 2 p.m. On learning how to do a herringbone or inwards. We also call it a catch stitch. And I have to say, of all the stitches I've ever learnt, it's my favourite. So if you don't know how to do one, get yourself upstairs for 2 p.m. because it's just such a relaxing and meditative stitch to do. And it's interesting because I see a lot of hems that have still got staples in them. The hem that fell down at work, or sellotape even. And now and I used to do that too at work, but now I can't wait till a Saturday morning to fix a hem that's come down. And the other one too is depilling. I don't typically take in a lot of clothes that need a lot of depilling because often they're acrylic. And I just wanted to say that a lot of people are really crazy for depillers machines, little shavers. I don't even own one. You can just use a shaver. So the main thing is, if you're going to depill and use a shaver, and same with the machine, always go with the grain of the fabric, don't go against. Don't ever depill cashmere, ever. Just use your fingers to, gently pluck. Holes and tears is another one that I commonly see, and I've just got some examples I brought in today in terms of patching holes. And the first one is, this is a 1980s jumpsuit that I got, and the button's finished here. And so when I picked it up for $1 on the last resort table, it had a big tear down there because it was always going to be difficult to get on and off. So I just put a zipper in, and I used an old metal zipper because I thought it was kind of more of a feature. It's 80s, so typically the seams on 80s garments are very narrow. We were starting to save money on clothes by then, or the manufacturers were, I should say. So I cut out the shoulder pads, which fortunately had been covered in the same fabric. So I think for patching, it's always a matter of, is there some spare fabric you can gain? I'm just showing you this one here because it's a very basic knitwear mend, and underneath I just obviously brought the whole together and then just did a little very basic heart on it, and it's really at the extent of my skill level. And I wanted to show you another one, which is, this is Diana, who's sitting over here. I actually broke my arm at one stage and I couldn't do any repairs. And Diana did this fantastic embroidery work on, this is I think it's about a 1960s Canterbury skirt. Unusually the labels actually is in the front of the waistband, which you don't see very often. But I think it might have been a uniform piece, but it had 2 bits of quite bad moth damage on the sides. So she did some really beautiful embroidery, which is what we would call a visible mend. And for those of you who don't do a lot of mending, if you want to do a search on visible mending on Google, you'll just come up with an absolute plethora of amazing techniques, particularly actually around knitwear. There's some really just stunning. I just never run out of inspiration. I've got another example too here, and this is just really about working with materials that you've got. This is a 1960s wool dress. It was a heavy wool and it had some really bad moth damage in the front, so quite bad holes. And it was actually, I did this one over COVID, so I couldn't run down to Jeff's Emporium and buy any trim or anything. So I really just had to work with what I had, which to me is actually kind of nice because it's the essence of sustainability rather than buy something. What have we got in the haberdashery stash? And I had plenty of red rickrack, so I just put some red rickrack down through there. And then, and this is, I've got a section on my Insta page. I've just got some examples of some, I call them reviving, where I've fixed some things. So here it was just a kind of in progress shots. Obviously took me a while to do because I said, getting back to this, it took my time. So it might have been a couple of days delay. What else have I got? I've got, actually, just before we get to this one, I just want to show you this song. I talked about the example of 80s garments don't have a lot of fabric to use. When you're dealing with older garments, and this is a dress from the 1960s, which I've turned inside out, I'll turn it right way around, but it had a hole at the sleeve join, quite a big hole. So luckily the lining on the inside of the facing here was quite big, so I just trimmed a piece out, and which you'll never know, and then I just zigzagged around the interfacing. And so it's great to turn these garments inside out and see what you've got to actually work with in terms of extra fabric. And the patch is a little patch there, so I tried to match the circle with the little bit I cut out, so that can just go around too for anyone who's interested in looking. And as I say, my expertise isn't really in doing a lot of really fancy repairs, but I just always think I'm just going to give it a go. And so I really encourage you guys to give it a go. Or if you've got friends like Diana who can do amazing embroidery, that's always a bonus too. I've put up this Instagram page too, the Scene UK. They're a repair organisation, and they have freelancers who are experts in various repairs who work for them. And quite often they'll give you examples of them doing repairs, so that can be quite inspiring too. And they contract to Net-a-Porter, so you get to see some pretty amazing garments being worked on too, and shoes and bags, which is always nice to see that even at that end of the market, things are actually being, I suppose, brought back to full use. Sewing missing buttons is another one which is obviously really common, another thing that I see all the time. And if there isn't a spare button, and I have to say too, always with looking for spare buttons in garments, always turn your garment inside out. So actually yesterday when I was looking at this, I discovered that it's got a spare button, lo and behold, somewhere on the leg. Yeah, which leg is it? Other leg. Yeah, we got there, which I didn't even know was there. So always check your garment that may still have it intact. So I discovered that yesterday. Thank you guys for having me along, because I've discovered my spare button. The other thing too is often you can just take a button that's not really in common or in sight, so it might be a low button on a blouse, or if it's a dress that you don't plan on doing up the top button, taking that off. And what I'll often do is, because I do like to have all of my buttons looking good on the front, is often I'll just replace the two that are on the cuff with matching buttons that are kind of similar in the similar colour tone, and then use those two cuff buttons somewhere on the front so it's not so obvious. This one here's just an example of a cardigan I had that came in, and it had beautiful covered buttons in the blue, but a couple were missing, so I happened to have a stash of vintage covered buttons that had come off various suits and things like that, so I just decided I was going to really mix it up and put a whole lot of different coloured buttons on there. And I think that can be a really a good way to gather your buttons, because managing buttons is a nightmare for me, I have to say, and for anyone who I suppose looks after clothes regularly. You're constantly going through the button tin looking for the right one. I try and group our buttons now by kind of some kind of tone. So I've just brought in my gold button bag, and quite often what I'll do is, if I don't have a button that's going to work for replacing, I will just paint them all out and put an interesting array of gold buttons or array of blue buttons or whatever. The other one I wanted to talk about really briefly before we move on to some other stuff is just alterations. And that's a kind of nice segue because that's an alteration in itself. And the thing for me is, as a person who's, I suppose, manages and sells vintage, there's always this thing of, if you make a significant alteration to a garment, have you kind of destroyed the essence of the garment? And I have to say I don't struggle with it too much because usually the things that I want to alter are things that probably weren't kind of great examples in the first place. And as a design. So I've got this example of this gold dress, which was a Lurex polyester. So the sleeves are really cute, but it's just too much fabric. So it was never going to look amazing on. So shortening it was a better idea for a design. And so a lot of the 70s maxis, often when they were just full-on print, are just too much if they don't have some other kind of, I suppose, nipped in bit or whatever going on. So I shortened that and I was able to make a 3-way cord belt. So that was a kind of, took forever to make the belt. I'll never be doing that again in my life. But anyway, I think it was a COVID one as well. But if a garment is a notable label, I'm very reluctant to, I have to say, make an alteration. Unless, of course, it's a garment that I think it's really, so small it's never going to be worn in its current capacity because it's never going to fit anyone. Actually, I brought in an example of, I bought this for myself from another reseller, Everyday Vintage, and for anyone who's my era, you'll remember that Sassoon was, the label to have, and I loved the tapestry and the leather patch on the back. But I got it, and it's a 25-inch waist, which at a squeeze, because my waist is quite malleable, I can kind of squeeze into, but it was actually just, I was never going to wear it, let's face it. I couldn't really breathe. So what I did, and it's not my best repair job, I've got to say, so I decided to unpick the tucks, unpick the waistband, add a section to the waistband, and I had to do a bit of dicking stuff because it's got these existing button domes, so I wanted to keep the first one, so I had to add in some fabric, and I was doing it after our batch, and I didn't have the right coloured denim, so everything's always a compromise. But anyway, I did the best I could, and now it's comfortably my size waist.